Welcome,
ladies and
ladies and
gentlemen. She's Justine.
And that's Danielle. And this is
That's what they called news.
Welcome to another episode of That's What They Called News.
Very excited that
That's gonna be our new theme song.
Oh, I love it. That's so great.
So we had a really long break.
Yes.
We put out a special episode. At the time, we don't usually do them. This is back to our regularly scheduled programming. But if you didn't listen to the last episode, the special episode about witches, about the witch trials, you have to listen to it. You just have to.
Yeah.
Guys, I promise it is top notch. And there's going to be 4 parts. So we're going to get to them all before Halloween. So, but this time I have some stories about some hauntings.
Ghost stories?
Yeah.
Yay.
They're like ghost assumptions, maybe.
Okay. That makes sense.
They're still entertaining.
Okay.
So our first one comes from the Daybook out of Chicago, Illinois, November 2nd, 1911. And this says, is Violet Edmonds haunted by the accusing wraith of her pastor lover's sweetheart? You got that right.
Pastor lover's sweetheart.
Yeah. Yep. That's what it says. Are you following?
Wow.
All right.
Okay.
Friends say she is, and declare that is why rich heiress and her family have deserted Richardson. This is by Stella Marquier, Boston, November 2nd. Since the arrest of her pastor lover for the murder of Avis Linnell, Violet Edmonds never has set feet outside the door of her home. Okay, so time out. This guy is her pastor. Also boyfriend? Murder. He is a murderer. He's a pastor.
I don't know
and a murderer.
About boyfriend, but it sounds like they're sleeping together.
They are definitely doing the nasty.
All right.
Why has she not stepped foot outside her home? Her multi-millionaire father, Moses Grant Edmonds, says she has been prostrated by the shock of her lover's arrest. No doubt. But another explanation of the confinement of Violet Edmonds to her home is being whispered about the select circle in which the Edmonds move. It is said that this girl, who was to have been wedded to the Reverend Clarence Virgil Thompson Richardson, is being haunted by the wraith of the girl who they say Richardson murdered. It is said that there is never a moment, day nor night, that the specter of pretty little Avis Linnell is far from Violet Edmonds. It is said that this is the reason that Violet Edmonds is, quote, ill in bed. It is said that for this reason, the offer of the Edmonds millions to aid Richardson in his fight to escape the electric chair will be withdrawn. I wonder if the story is true. Also, this is all in the newspaper. This is not me editorializing. It says, I wonder if the story is true. It is not impossible. It is not even unprecedented. 12 years ago, there occurred in Kent, England, a tragedy that was very similar to that which has blasted Violet Edmonds' life. The Reverend Rayburn Forbes, a curate in a country village, gave up the girl to whom he had been engaged from the days of his childhood, so wrong, in order to become the affianced husband of Lady Brooking, the daughter of the oldest and wealthiest family of the neighborhood. Dick face.
Yep.
The day Forbes's engagement to the Lady Brickeen was announced, the dead body of Clementine Watson, the girl with whom he had broken, was found in her bedroom at her home. 3 weeks later, Forbes was arrested, charged with murder. Poison had been found in her body.
Huh.
Forbes protested his innocence. The Lady Brickeen offered to stand by him. She did stand by him. She gave him the aid of both money and sympathy. And the day before Forbes was found guilty of Clementine Watson's murder, the Lady Brickeen was found dead in a room in her father's palatial home. She had committed suicide, and by the side of her body, the following note was found. I cannot stand this any longer. I do not know what peace is. I have not known a moment's rest since the day of Rayburn's arrest. Except in death, I shall never obtain another moment's peace. Clementine Watson's ghost haunts me day and night. She points an accusing finger at me. She asks me why I am aiding the man I know to be guilty. I do not believe he is guilty. At least I am not sure. I never would admit that I believed in his guilt. But I cannot stand the accusations of this ghost of the little country girl I despised any longer. God forgive me for what I am about to do. End quote. I'm sorry, the country girl that you despised?
Yeah.
You saw her man. You
It
have no
sounds like
reason to
maybe
despise her.
she had a hand in the
The
little
murder?
country girl's death.
Yeah. Is this the case with Violet Edmonds? Is the rich Brookline heiress who has laid millions at Richardson's feet haunted by the accusing wraith of Avis Linnell, rebuking for her striving to prevent justice to the dead? Is that why the threat to withdraw the Edmonds millions already has been made? Why Richardson may have to face a jury lacking the support of the woman he had hoped to call wife and whose money he hoped would make him rich for life? Perhaps it is. Who knows? But this much is certain. Since Richardson's arrest, Violet Edmonds has not dared to show herself even to her best friend. She has been kept in more strict seclusion than a Turkish sultan keeps his harem. The end.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, I just want to point out that was written by Stella Marquier.
Uh-huh.
So this is definitely a woman's feeling
Oh,
coming
for sure.
through there at the end. That was great. All right. You want the next one?
Sure.
All right.
Okay. This one comes from the Hartford Herald. Let's see. Haunted house near Hartford. And how it goes, and how it got its name many years ago. I'm just reading. Just
Just
reading.
reading. Yes, these are quotes. These are no
Okay.
old newspaper articles. We're just reading what they say.
Okay. Old Negro's mythical story. Reminiscences of old days when haunted houses were common. The ban long since removed. Editor's Herald. As but a few now living ever heard of the return to this house of the weird spirits of its deceased occupants and their nightly visits to this home of haunts, as told many years ago by the ignorant and superstitious persons of that time. Perhaps the story of the haunted house on the Morgantown Road, as it was told 65 years ago, may interest the readers of the Herald, as many of them never heard of Hartford ghost story before.
I sure haven't.
1 mile from the courthouse in Hartford, on what was known many years ago as the Morgantown Road, but now known as the Hartford and Beaver Dam Turnpike, is a country residence that to pass it after dark by the small white boys or some of the older colored population was a terror of that time. How the house came to be known as the haunted house, or at what time it became thus known to the believers in ghost stories, was never known by the superstitious of that time. The house is a brick one, built by the plan of a well-to-do citizen of that time, is 1.5 stories high, fronts the road, and is about far enough from the road to start an old-timey ghost story from. From what I learned at Hartford when I was a small boy, Sam Smith, the owner of the farm and builder of the house, was a prominent man of that time and died before he finished the house. He appeared to have had a desire to be long remembered, and on the stone sills of the front windows are these words in bold relief: Sam Smith, 1840, which can yet be read by a careful observer from the road. Sam Smith appears to have died suddenly, leaving his business in a very unsettled shape. He appears to have left much property and owed much at the time of his death. He was a prominent officer of the state militia, and at his sale, Frank Griffin, the local school teacher at the time, who owned the farm between Sam Smith's farm and the town of Hartford, bought his sword, had it shortened, and for years used it for cutting up corn, a much better use than stabbing the life out of men.
Indeed. Also, I love how they explain who these new characters are in just one really long sentence.
Right.
Like, he's the officer of the state militia, and then this guy, Frank Griffin, he's a local school teacher at that time, but he also owned this farm, and then he bought the sword, and, like, it's just,
Yes.
it's cool. That was a lot of information in one sentence, but also, yes, definitely better use of cutting up corn than stabbing the lives out of men. Absolutely.
In 1849, when my father moved his family to Hartford, the Sam Smith house was called the Haunted House by persons who were old enough to know better. When I first saw the farm, it was owned by Larkin Knoll, and later was owned by Elisha M. Ford, who owned it at the time of his death, near 1851. But I never believed that either of these Christian gentlemen had anything to do with starting a report that the house was haunted. The story of the haunted house was that at various times of the year, the spirits of some of the departed members of the household would return to the house, that late in the night lights could be seen in the house, and Mrs. Smith and her domestics could be heard and seen at their spinning wheels, reels, hackles, etc., while the voice of old Mrs. Smith could be heard commanding her servants to be more vigilant about their work. In conversation with an aged colored woman about a return of the departed spirits of the dead never returned to this world of sorrow again, and that there were no ghosts or haunts in this world. The old colored woman said, "Oh yes."
I just want to preface this as, I don't know how you're going to read it, but
I
this is
don't know.
very much written in the form of, I don't remember what they call it, but it's like
Like
how Gone with the
jigaboo.
Wind was written.
Yeah.
Like, it's written how you say it, not like the actual words. So, yep. Just Gone with the Wind is all I
Yep.
can say.
Mammy.
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Wish me luck. Oh, yes, there is. Way in the night, you can hear old Mrs. Smith spinning on the big wheel and say to the little gal, "Rock that cradle, rock that cradle." Clitter clatter, buzz buzz. Oh, missus, there is haunts.
It's a really good Southern accent too. Um, but it doesn't say buzz. I'm just calling you out on that one. It says bazoo.
Bazoo,
I don't
bazoo.
know what bazoo
I don't
doesn't,
know.
but all right. Sorry.
Yeah,
Continue.
that's okay. Um, as I have said, in the house was not finished when Sam Smith died. The staircase had been completed up to the attic or upper story, the upper floor laid, and the end window frames closed with rough boards. As I had to pass this house on my return from my father's farm to my home in town after night, I hurried by the place, looking back to see that none of the spooks were following me. In company with some other small white boys, we visited the haunted house one night, one bright November day, and went up the stairs until we could see what was in the attic. Dry gourds and pieces of broken harness were laying promiscuously over the floor, from which the autumn wind had removed the light dust. And boy was and boy, as I then was, I could not help thinking that the clatter of the loosely nailed boards in the window frames and the rattle of the dry gourds, pieces of rope, etc., on the floor greatly aided the spooks in their carnivals on dark and windy nights. I heard my oldest brother, then a young man, ask a very pious old colored man why the house was called the haunted house, and he said that after Sam Smith died, his farm was offered for sale, and a man of means wanted the farm but didn't want to pay its value for it, and started the haunted house story to buy the farm for less than it's worth. But I never believed that Larkin Nall or Elijah M. Ford were either of them that man. My father was an enemy to all ghost stories, which he said were the work of the devil, yet he would stay and hear them told. And when he first heard the story of the haunted house on the Morgantown Road, he gave it as his opinion that it was the work of some schemer for personal benefit. I heard him as I heard him ask a businessman of Hartford who came into his shop, which was on the site of the Thomas Bros country room, why the Sam Smith house was called the haunted house. The gentleman talked to my father in so low a voice that I did not hear what he said. But my father never spoke of the haunted house after this interview on that subject. One bleak December evening a few years ago, I passed the haunted house of my boyhood days, and perhaps I took my last look at it. It appeared to have undergone much improvements, and the merry voices of little children at play in the yard, I thought, was enough to remove the ignorant, superstitious band that years ago made this house a terror to those who were young or uninformed by a more enlightened age.
I like
What a
that.
mighty, yeah.
Uninformed by a more enlightened age.
What a mighty lever this is, the power of refinement. When strengthen, what? When strengthened?
Strengthen. Yep, that's strengthen ed. Strengthen ed. Uh-huh.
Okay, I'm not crazy. When strengthened by the teaching of the scriptures. The many who now daily pass the haunted house of 65 years ago and hear the joyful shout of little children at their play, how little do they know of the dark shadows that years ago hung over this now happy country home. Edwin Forbes of Fordsville, Kentucky.
What a cute story.
Oh my
All
goodness.
right. I've got one from the Daily Arizona Silver Belt. from Globe, Arizona, the 10th of March, 1910.
All right.
Haunted houses in life of actor. Mother of William Faversham started stories of spooks, houses deserted one after other, forced by circumstances to move and gave spirits as reason.
Okay.
Okay, so this one actually comes from London, but it was published in an American newspaper, so I thought we could make an exception.
I'll
Um,
take it.
all right. London, March 9th. The village of Chiddingford, 30. Okay, and I'm just going to start the saying I'm guaranteed to pronounce these words wrong, these names of towns and stuff.
But
So
it'll
I
be
apologize.
entertaining.
I'm legit doing my best. My best is terrible, but I'm doing it all the same.
I believe in you,
The
friend.
vil- I thank you. The village of Chiddingford, 30 miles south of London, is in a state of turmoil over the discovery that William Faversham's country home, the old manor, is haunted. A ghost dressed in armor has been seen nightly parading across the roof. The villagers have been
How
out.
did it get up there?
I don't know. The villagers have been out every night watching for the appearance of the wraith. Credit- Creditable eyewitnesses have arrested that they have seen the armored specter. The small boys of the neighborhood have been throwing stones at real or imaginary ghosts, with the result that very considerable damage has been done to the windows of the manor. Ghosts are not new. It seems that ghosts in the Faversham family are nothing new. A relative of the actor has confided to a writer on one of the important London dailies a rather extraordinary story regarding family ghosts. It is to the following effect. William Faversham was born in a fine old house in London, number 1 Bentinck Terrace, overlooking Regent Park. When a youth, his father died, leaving his mother with insufficient funds to carry on such pretentious establishment. The family moved into a less expensive quarters, and the old house passed into other hands. Young Faversham, after attending Hillside College, went on the stage and after 2 years' experience with the Provincial Stock Company, came to America in 1887. He has visited England a number of times since, but 4 years ago, thinking he would like to show his boy, William, his old home, he one day wandered in the direction of Regent Park and stood before number 1 Brentig Terrace. Judge of his surprise and disappointment when he discovered that the old place was fast approaching ruin. The windows were boarded up, and the glass cased conservatory, which had been his father's delight, was smashed beyond recognition. The house, a desirable establishment, was in a fashionable and much favored neighborhood, and why it should have been thus gone to rack and ruin was a question of lively interest. Said house was haunted. I like how they put like headlines in the middle of the stories. It makes it very weird reading it.
Yes.
Well, she was looking at the old place. Wow. While looking at the old place, a decrepit keeper came out of the house, and Mr. Faversham accosted him. The old man said that the house was reputed to be haunted, and no one could be found who would live in it. Asked why the beautiful conservatory had been destroyed, the old keeper replied that a ghost walked at midnight along the glass roof, and that the boys thereabouts had been busy shying stones at imaginary spooks. Mr. Faversham told the old man his name, when when that personage, with amusement, informed him that the house was discovered to be haunted by his family, and that nobody could be found who would risk living there since they had departed. This was all very curious news to the actor, for as a boy he had never heard of nightly or spookly visitations. The same summer, Mr. Faversham purchased a home in Chiddingford, Surrey, a short distance from Cartbridge, in the same county and hamlet where he resided with his mother subsequently to her giving up the house in Bid Terrace. A yearning came over the actor to see his old home, where he lived so happily with his mother, brothers, and sisters. Here it was, with a pillow fastened to his breast, mounted on a pony, with a broomstick in lieu of a lance of the medieval knight in hand. He played at tourney and got many a whacking from a companion similarly accoutred. He must show this old home and joust field to his boy. We can't go home again. Sorry. My brain has been just throwing song lyrics at me lately. It's just, they
Mine
come
does it
from
too.
nowhere. It just happens. It's getting crazy up here.
Absolutely.
So one day, they pointed the auto for Cartbridge to visit the quote, ancestral castle. The place was happily discovered, fairly presentable. This was a comfort. Alighting from the motor, Faversham approached the house and found it occupied by an old couple, miserably poor in circumstances. Upon being questioned, the old people informed their visitor that they were allowed to live there and till the ground at a trifling rental, and for the reason that the former tenants, a Mrs. Faversham and her children, had discovered that the house was haunted by mischievous spooks. Nobody since then could be found who would live in a place at any price. Actor much amazed. Amazed that number one Bentig Terrace was haunted, the actor was now thoroughly startled to find that his late home was likewise the stomping place of meddlesome wraiths. He returned to his place at Chiddingford, a worried and amazed individual. His old aunt was to visit his home the next day, and he related his discoveries to her. With a merry twinkle in her eye, the old lady heard the story and then remarked, William, it is evident that you were never fully acquainted with your mother. She had a sense of humor. When she left Bentig Terrace, she was too proud to tell her friends that her worldly circumstances compelled her to give up the old place so dear to her heart. So she whispered to them that the house was haunted, that she would live there no longer. This evidently had its allurement, for it was the same excuse that she gave her friends at Cart Bridge for leaving a pretty home that she came to love. But her sense of humor was overpowering, and it always amused her mightily that the people believed in her ghosts. Number one Bentig Terrace, London, is now, as it was in its prime, and occupied by a family who are informed of the sorts of ghosts who once walked the conservatory roof, but the pretty cottage at Cartbridge is still in possession of the old folks, who are allowed a cozy home, rent a trifle because the house is haunted. That's my favorite ghost story ever. I love that so much. Her
I
sister
think
was
it's
like,
pretty great.
oh my God.
How
She
did you
was just
not know
joking.
this? Yeah,
It's so funny.
that's great.
All right. Do you think your nose will handle another read, or do you
I
want me
think
to?
so.
This one's
I'll
up.
give it a try. If
All right.
not, okay. This one is from the San Antonio Daily Light. Demons of the Woods. How the inhabitants of many countries became. Ugh. How the inhabitants of many countries come to believe in them. From the Tyrol of Switzerland, from Germany, or from Brittany, says
Brittany.
the Gentleman's Magazine, come well ascertained accounts of the popular belief in certain wild spirits of the woods, who are painted in all the most frightful shapes the imagination can suggest, and are categorized by their delight in every possible form of malevolence. They kidnap and devour children, bewitch the cattle, and lead men to lose their way in the forest. They can assume any size, from the diminutive to the most gigantic, nor is any form of bird or beast an impossible personation of them. The Skongman?
Sure. It's
Sure,
Swedish. I
okay.
don't know.
The forest spirit of Sweden is like a man, but tall as the highest tree. He decoys men into the woods, and when they have hopelessly lost their way and begin to weep for fear, leaves them with mocking laughter.
That is a man's worst nightmare, isn't it?
To be
I'm
laughed
gonna
at like
leave
that?
you on the
Yeah.
verge of tears and laugh at you. Yep.
The conception is well nigh identical with that found among the natives of the forests of Brazil, showing with that uniformity similar conditions produce similar effects upon the human mind. But the Russian spirits, uh, legishi, from a
Hmm.
Polish word for wood, are even more significant. For not only are the unusual diabolical attributes assigned to them, such as the leading of men astray, or the sending of them of sickness, but also the controversial diabolical features. Did I read that over again?
Conventional.
Oh, conventional diabolical features. Their bodies are after the human pattern, but they have the ears and horns of goats. Their feet are cloven, and their finger ends in claws. The Russian wood spirit is, in fact, the devil of medieval imagination and nothing else, a fact which strongly supports the inference that it is from the wood and from the wind rustling over the treetops that the idea of the supernatural agency of devils first took possession of the imagination of mankind. It is no way inconsistent with this theory that besides devils of the forest, there are those of the air at the water. The conception is one which would have met with no barrier to the extension of its dominions, and the devil of the trees or forests would from the first be closely associated with, if at all distinguished from, the spirit that moved in the trees and was powerful enough to overcome. In this way, the wild spirits of the woods would pass insensibly into those spirits of the air, which our ancestors identified with the wild huntsman, and which English peasants still often hear when they listen to the passage of the Seven Whistlers.
All right. So settled. Yes, I am opposed to American girls marrying foreigners, said old Mrs. Sipes. I'm just that opposed to that if my girls can't marry people of their own sex, they needn't be married at all. And that's just all there is about it. February Lippincotts.
Wow.
I mean,
Sure.
okay, so that's very expensive for this time.
Yeah,
All right. You want me to go again or you go?
I can go.
All right.
A man and his wife dress exactly alike, also smoke same kind of cigarettes, and patronize bars together.
Sounds great.
Sounds like a happy couple. St. Louis, January 28th. There is a woman in St. Louis who dresses just as her husband does, in men's clothing. The couple have their clothes made by the same tailor. They
No.
choose their neckties from the same lot. They smoke the same brand of cigarettes. They stand at the same bar and split a bottle of beer. They play match games of billiards, and they are always together on the streets and off. The woman has been doing this here and elsewhere for 3 years, and not one of the thousands of persons they have met in that time has ever suspected that she was a woman. to to the public, she is Gus Sibe, and he is Prince Galano? Okay, but in private life, they are Mr. and Mrs. Seidenberg. The pair are staying at the Rillings Hotel. Mrs. Galano was given a great deal of notice over the country 3 years ago. when it was discovered in New York through an accident on a streetcar that for 9 years she had been wearing men's clothing and working as a man. Again, she came into public notice when it was learned that she was one of the many wives of Johann Hooch. Hoch? Something. Hawk? Okay. The Chicago Bluebeard, who was hanged for murdering one of his wives. Mrs. Galano believes that her kind of chumship with her husband prevents misunderstandings and attendant divorces.
I mean, I agree.
Yeah,
They just seem like they're good friends. They just want to
yeah,
go out and hang out together
I see nothing wrong with it.
without the conventional roles. Like, I love that.
Yeah,
I think that's great.
good for her.
All right. School mom won out before school board. Result of alleged fight in Hancock County schoolroom recently. The Hawkeye Clarion says Educational Division Board Number 1, seen of 10 sub-trustees, met in Hawesville for the purpose of passing on some of the phrases of trouble existing for several weeks in the Midway District. Mrs. James Hall is the competent teacher of this school, and before her recent marriage was Miss Carrie Sweetheart of Chambers, one of the leading teachers of the county. About 2 weeks ago, a rough and tumble fight, it is said, occurred between the teacher and the three girls, pupils of Trustee Ed Aldrich, in the school building. The fight is said to have come up over the alleged fact that the children refused or failed to greet their children in the greet their teacher in the proper manner on arriving at the school building. Prior to this, however, and which may have led up to this incident, Mr. Aldrich, as his trustee, had sought to have Mrs. Hall displace his teacher because of the alleged indiscreet conduct of Mr. and Mrs. Hall in the presence of the children. The trustee was asked by the division board chairman to reduce these charges to writing and them, thus fixing a foundation upon which was to begin proceedings to unseat the teacher, before he would call the board together to consider the matter. This Mr. Aldrich declined to do, and the fight followed. After the schoolhouse fight, in which the three girls were pitted against their teacher, Mrs. Hall suspended or expelled the children. The proceedings of last Saturday were for the purpose of ascertaining whether or not the children should be reinstated in the school. And after hearing all the evidence, the division board said by its verdict that the children should remain suspended during this term of school, thus upholding the action of the teacher. That's right. I
Good for
bet she
her.
wanted to be like, booyah.
Probably.
Do
That's
people
what I
still
would
say
have
that?
done.
Did people say that then? Probably not.
Probably not. I believe I have heard booyah in recent times, though. So, yeah. I'm going to say booyah is still
So,
relative.
did you know that you can set a personalized tone on your phone when you plug it in, like to charge?
No.
Yeah. Do you know what my daughter set my tone as?
What?
Every time I plug my phone in, it
Huh?
goes womp womp,
Wow.
like Siri says, womp womp.
That's
Yeah.
kind of funny. I'm not going to lie.
Every time. I don't know how she did it.
Every
And
time.
honestly, it makes me giggle every time. So I'm just going to leave it.
There you go.
Because I forget. Like, I mean, I charge my phone generally once a day. I might plug it in the car or at work for a minute, but
Hmm.
like, usually it's at home at night. And so it's like, you're just like lay down and you're like, plug it in and it goes womp womp womp.
Oh my gosh.
Like, ah.
That's
All
great.
right. Well, another episode. We are back, guys. We are gonna do this. New
We
episodes
are.
every Sunday. Watch for our bonus episodes for the witch trials. Part 1 was already released, so make sure you go back and listen to that if you haven't. And part 2, 3, and 4 will be coming up before Halloween.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! And next week, I believe I've got um, old traditions, old Halloween traditions and stories of how Halloween got to where it is or where it came from. So
I like that.
that should be fun too. Yes, I love Halloween. I love it so
Me
much.
too.
All right. Well, thank you for listening and
We will
goodbye.
talk to you next time.
Bye.